Good day. My name is Fred Adelhelm, and I'm going to do a brief interview with one of the top union officials, ETU officials, and the topic really is what to expect from unions and collective bargaining in the first half of 2025. And the union official that I will talking to is Joe Gallagher of ETU. And Joe is one of their senior negotiating specialists. He's got about 20 years experience in collective bargaining. And Joe has kindly agreed to share some of his views in terms of what the expectations are for 2025. My brief to Joe was quite simple. Give us your opinion in terms of what the first 6 months next year is going to look like from a union perspective. It is important that as employers, you realize that the economy obviously plays a major role in what you can bargain and what you can't bargain for. And what most employers are keen to establish is the wages, wage rates, and whatever the wage rates then flows into, because that, in a very tight economic environment, influences profitability, turnover, etc. With the current high rates of unemployment, the forecast is that the first half of 2025 is going to remain tight and difficult for employers. I represent Adelhelm in New Zealand, and I'm based in New Zealand, in Auckland. However, Adelhelm has got operations in Melbourne, Sydney. We have an office based over there. We have operators in Sydney and other parts of Australia. We also recently opened an office in London, in the UK, basically looking at what's happening in the EU. Because the global trend, it's a tight economy, everyone's become polarized, everyone's positional. What's happening in the UK and in the EU, and what's happening in Southern Africa, and what's happening in Australia has an impact on global trade, which then flows into what's happening in New Zealand. We also have representation in Southern Africa. We have a person based in Cape Town, South Africa. We have people based in the UK, as I've said earlier, and we also have someone based in the EU in Frankfurt, who gives us regular updates. But today is all about what's happening in New Zealand and what's going to impact on the New Zealand community, the private sector community. And our role really is to give advice and guidance to employers, which is practical, makes sense, which is forward-thinking, and which focuses on business needs in general. So let me bring in our guest for today, Joe Gallagher.
Great.
Hello, Joe. I've just given a glowing review of your background and what you've achieved. So just as an intro to the podcast, the topic, as we discussed, is going to be about what to expect from unions and collective bargaining in the first half of 2025. I mean, that's the intro. As I've said, you're a man with track record, 20 years collective bargaining experience, senior negotiator, well known in the business world and in especially in the manufacturing environment. And I didn't say anything about your nickname in the industry amongst union people as well as business people. But I know that they're going to probably make a movie about you one of these days, because Joe's fondly referred to as the closer. So he gets called in by parties when everyone's struggling to find a way forward, and Joe comes in, cuts to the chase, and comes up with solutions that very often deliver good results. Joe, any general views, in terms of current settlement range? I know we often chat informally, but, currently, what's your take? I know you're doing a lot of negotiations. What's your take generally?
Look, I think and thanks for the intro, Fred. Yeah, look, I mean, we're coming off high inflationary numbers over the last 12 months. We're seeing the settlements probably in the vicinity of slowing down a bit, but I mean, I've done all the major agreements like Kinleith, Pulp and Paper Mill, New Zealand Steel, Downers Power. I've supported Coca-Cola recently, North Power. All of settlements averaging around the 4.5. Some of them are tipping into the 5. But we are seeing a general slowing up of the market. I've just settled New Zealand Steel last week, so it's hot off the press. That's the makeup of the deal's a little bit complicated, but just for the general populace, it's essentially a 3+3+3 settlement. In Tasty, which is a food manufacturing plant in Te Aratu, one of my colleagues has just done a 4+4+4. I think that, but we are seeing a general softening. You are starting to see some of those industries like the print sector's really struggling. We're trying to conclude an agreement currently with Blue Star, but that sector's one that's really kind of all that revenue spend, advertising spend has really dried up. I think we will start to see settlement. CPI is currently sitting, I think, about 2.2, and I think we'll probably get another interest rate cut this week of probably 50 base points. Some are putting a bet on 75 base points. And I think we will start to see a bit of an upswing in the economy in the new year, some green shoots after what has been a pretty brutal last few months, particularly for the manufacturing sector. I'm dealing with Kinleith at the moment, so no sooner have we settled the agreement than they've announced the closure of paper making capacity in New Zealand, which is a process we're working through. So I think we'll start to see, flowing into the new year, settlements sort of flattening out about 3%. Obviously, I think the health sector, they've just settled that big Te Whatu Ora agreement, which kind of really underpins, that's really a funding stream. So I think the settlements there are largely dictated to by the funding that is driven by government.
Yeah.
But I think all that, I think we're starting to see the nurses rattle their sabres. So I think there's be more to be seen on in that space. So, I think I think settlements will start to float around that 3% and potentially a bit more, because even though CPI is, quite low, the costs, the LCI costs, so the costs that affect our members, like housing, rent, people have still got high mortgage rates. The cost of food is not going down. I went to the supermarket last week, 2 adults, 2 children, $380. That was a light shop. So, people are still facing those cost pressures. So you've got to keep inflation as a number, but I think people need to still see some real wage growth in the next 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I think it's going to be tough, especially the first half of the year. Various commentators are predicting different things, obviously, but best case scenario, probably we're going to be looking at around the 3. I tend to sort of, concur with you. Worst case scenario, which leads me into the next question, is that there are smaller and medium-sized employers and manufacturers are really, really struggling. And as you know, the unemployment rate is going up. There's a lot of redundancies happening everywhere and closures, etc. In the last month alone, we've had a number of employers asking advice from us. In other words, how do they go about doing a 0% increase? And I'm just going, wow, that's a change. And some of these are, I wouldn't say they're the large mainstream manufacturers. They're medium to small size, but guys are feeling the heat. And I mean, the opening line is they phone and they say, hey, what do we do? How do we get a 0 increase? What's your view on that? I mean, is it possible in the current climate? As a seasoned union campaigner, when an employer says, okay, well, our opening position is 0 and our closing position is 0, I mean, you normally get agitated.
Yeah, look, we've been there before at New Zealand Steel when the hot rolled coil price and the iron sand price was, basically hitting dangerous territory, and we're at a 0+1. I think you have to look at all the atmospheric conditions that surround the organisation, and have a transparent have a transparent conversation. I think we've seen in the past. I think people tended to use COVID as an excuse to try and pump zero wage increases, which is never good when you do that, because unlike a lot of these kind of economists who sit in Wellington with their abacuses, I don't, and I think our economy really showed. Our domestic economy really held up really well under COVID, and it's a shame that it's deteriorated so fast now. But I think, despite what people think, I think the government made the right choice in propping up business and people, and that really allowed our domestic economy to power through COVID and out the other side. If you fast forward to now, the question I would ask employers: are you prepared to guarantee that there will be no layoffs during the term of whatever agreement you do? Because for me and for a lot of working class people, if people are genuine about it, I think people are starting to say job security is an issue, right? So if you're going to offer zero, what else are you going to guarantee? People are not going to lose their jobs for the period of that, if it's a 12-month deal, and I would say that I think we'll see as the economy start to swing up next year. But if you want to do that, are you prepared to back it? And I have done that on employers who have said, yeah, no, we're with you. We'll agree to no layoffs during the term of that agreement. So put your money where your mouth is. People say, oh, we can't do that. Well, you can. You can do anything you like if you're open and transparent with your staff. So yeah.
So there's a quid quo quo. Generally, if you're looking for zero, it's highly probable what you've got to focus on is that you're going to guarantee some sort of, there won't be any redundancies or layoffs over that period, etc. That's probably, if you can't give an increase, at least give some guarantee about not making anyone redundant.
Yeah, well, if you're committed to your employees, and I think if you're committed to your employees, and you want to ride it out, and some companies hunker down because some companies are, import, export, commodity prices, people are governed by whatever, and they know they can ride it out, and they don't want to lose their staff. Well, it's a way to show that everyone's, bought into the concept of let's just get through this storm, and and then we'll be on the other side of this. And I think it shows a genuine commitment from both parties.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, no, I agree. Tell me, in terms of, obviously with the unemployment hovering close to 5, and the forecast is that unemployment figures is probably going to peak at about 5.5, somewhere around there, which is pretty high, as you know, for New Zealand being a small population. If you take all the working people and you take a 5% percentage of that, that is a lot of people that are out of jobs. Do you see as a union operator, when an employer starts saying, if you don't pull your heads in, are you going to force the company to make more people redundant, etc.? Do you feel generally, are you guys as a union official, are you more reserved and not quite as aggressive in your bargaining because you're concerned about job losses generally, or is it not making any difference? You just say, look, you need to do what you need to do. Yeah.
Well, I think it's horses for courses. No one sets out to get into it hard out. Obviously, I've just ratified New Zealand Steel. We've had some pretty robust conversations. The workforce is not exactly happy. We've got a deal across the line. But I think you have to be cognizant of the what's happening around you. And as long as it's not weaponized, I think you can have a sensible conversation about that to find your pathway through.
Yeah. All right. And then, the highly advertised and highly marketed approach to collective bargaining is, the whole interest-based bargaining, the high performance, high engagement model, various versions of that. Does that actually work in the current highly stressed economic environment where people are actually looking at hard cold facts, i.e. the dollar? Does the sort of interest-based bargaining model still work, or does it sort of get watered down and fade away? What's your general view? Your experience with various versions of it. It ranges from in New Zealand, who basically put a huge effort into it. Various health sectors looked at it. The councils have looked at it, and everyone's got slightly different versions of it. Do you think in the current harsh economic environment, people are interested in hearing about, common interests?
Well, I think I think if you've got interest-based bargaining, and it's a shared philosophy, then you can get through the bargaining. What we do see, and I have seen from some advocates and some employer advocates, is they bastardize the concept. They say, "Oh, this is interest-based," but it's not. They cluster the things into pockets, and when I pull it apart, it's really they're trying to rip the ass out of an agreement. So, and I don't think that's interest bargaining per se. I look at the ports of Auckland. I look at and I've got a lot of I've done a lot of work with Phil Doak on what I call high performance, high engagement, but I prefer to say high engagement, which I think then drives high performance. I think those systems are not necessarily governed for bargaining per se. I think they are systems you ingrain along the way, so that essentially when you get to the bargaining table, a lot of those matters are ironed out. If you look at Fonterra, and I don't negotiate it, but I think that they do a lot of work before they get to the bargaining table. It's almost done before they get there. That's a mature symbiotic relationship. And so I think high performance, high engagement has got a place. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Something it's a collaboration, but I think it is. But I think if you do it properly, I'm dealing with a big employer at the moment who potentially is exiting a commercial contract. Now we've got a good relationship. We'll go down and deal with that, and the general public won't even know that we've gone from one to another. So I don't necessarily think it works in bargaining. But I think what you do is you get an agreement to get an agreement, because in reality, some of this big picture stuff that you want to do, there's just no way you can do it across the bargaining table. It's just not enough time. It's too much pressure. And in this environment, as the economy starts to deteriorate, I'm talking to employers and saying, hey, let's just do a rollover for 12 months and let's just get through this next sticky bit, and let's come back, later next year and have a crack at it, So, I don't think there's one size fits all.
No, I think you're good. It's a cultural issue, basically. We're talking about culture within an organization of, how do you engage with your employees, good times or bad times. That's really the issue in terms of, I think so anyway.
Yeah, so do I. And then you throw in the new one, just transition. And I've negotiated that successfully with New Zealand Post. I think if you put in place, that gives you a suite of ways to manage your business and engage with the union in a much more transparent way over a short, medium, or long term. For example, mail's declining. I'm not arguing about mail decline. I'm putting in place a whole lot of process where we can pull levers as the demand requires. So,
I agree. In the current harsh economic environment that we're facing, is the union still feeling that they can contribute towards getting deals done? There's with the new government, conservative government, the Minister of Employment Relations, Workplace Relations being fairly conservative, changes of legislation, all those sort of things. Are the unions still firing on all 8 cylinders, or are we down to? Are we sort of feeling, like we got to just, as a union, we've just got to survive this patch and then we can go again? In other words, once the economy picks up.
I don't necessarily think so. We've seen some big meetings happen by the union recently. We've got massive turnout right across the country. You know, and people are engaged. We've seen a lot of, you know, I think it's interesting that not all of the government, but part of the government's decided to pick a fight with Murraydom, and I think they've unleashed a new generation of activists. So I think, you know, we're in pretty good seat.
Yeah.
Anyone who knows me, you know, when I negotiate, I negotiate. I don't negotiate with the government. The government's come and go. For me, it's a collective bargain. That's, you know, if the minister wants to go and do whatever she wants to do and make those changes, and she's going to do that. They wiped out fair pay agreements, but they didn't even get off the ground. You know, and they're making a number of other changes, and they'll do what they'll do, and we'll react how we react. You know, and for me, we just get on with it.
Yeah, I know. I buy into that. I mean, as I said, I'm interested in your comment in Europe, for instance, and in the US, because I mean, what happens in New Zealand is not unique. We've got positional issues happening in terms of macro government stuff, both in the US as well as in Europe. And if you look at the German economy, you look at the UK economy, you look at the US economy, and the unions involved in bargaining, it's virtually a carbon copy of what we've got in New Zealand. Obviously, in terms of scale, I mean, we're a small little operator, but what's happening here is happening virtually everywhere else. Similar scenario. And interestingly enough, one of the union officials in Germany was quoted as saying, well, you know, in the current economic environment that we're in, I mean, with the collective bargaining isn't happening anymore. We as a union, we're actually moving into collective begging. I mean, how does that resonate with you? I mean, I like the term collective begging.
Yeah. I don't. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees.
Yeah.
And so for me and for my members, I'm not about to beg, and you know, we will negotiate, and we will work to get a deal. But you know, we're not in the begging business. Not going to start now. Never have. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't beg. But I know I'm conscious, and you know, I think as a union, we're not into that type of behaviour. You know, and I think we just need to find a sensible way. I think we are a country that is slightly different to other countries and other groups. You know, I just saw the Dockers in America. They just settled them. They shut down, I think, the West Coast. They settled that agreement. They come in with they got some pretty big outfits and some, you know, pretty big agreements. I mean, New Zealand, we're at the bottom of the, you know, at the bottom of the earth. But I think as a society, we are a little bit like the Scandinavians. I think we do generally take an interest-based approach to things and try and work through them and settle them. Maybe not everyone, but by and large, we try and reach a sensible outcome.
And looking at that, I mean, really, in terms of the closure for 2025, I mean, I'm forecasting over the next 6 months. As we know, nothing much happens December, January, because within the business community, everybody goes, oh, well, that's when all the union officials go on leave, so we get a breather and we don't have to worry about it. But then come February, all hell breaks loose again. That's not my view, but I'm just saying, you know, that's the sort of general consensus you get. Do you think that the economic environment is not going to change dramatically? It'll be a slow drip feed improvement, and we probably find the first 6 months still pretty tough for a lot of employers. But do you feel that there's a place for as an employer, because a lot of people phone us and want advice on, you know, I'm not into spending a lot of time with the union official or the union. I'm actually struggling at the moment, and all I'm really interested is to persuade people of the facts, the truth. My business is struggling. I haven't got any money, so stop, causing all this grief and threatening and potential industrial action. It's just too tough for me. I mean, what's your general view? I mean, going into 2025, do you think we're going to have tough bargaining in the first 6 months, or do you think, I know it's horses for courses, but I mean, general sense, do you think we'll have same as we've had over the last few months?
Oh, yeah, look, I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that we're seeing quite a few layoffs. I mean, obviously, I deal with some large employers, and I'll be bargaining with New Zealand Post next year. Um, and we're going to have some tough conversations. There's no denying that they're laying people off. We're going through a big restructure at the moment. There's no denying that mail is declining, but parcels at some point is kind of in a bit of a dip. But that's going to turn around. If you look at what's happening in Europe, parcel growth is actually what's holding up those big European outfits, particularly in Norway. So that will turn around, but it's about setting up the business. So I think it's about for us. It'll be having a conversation about how we create overall value for the workers, but acknowledging the business and I guess that I think it'll probably be time to have a conversation about the changing nature of consumerism and people's wants and needs. People want their parcels delivered every day at all hours of the day and night. And so I think we'll be having quite a big conversation. And I take heart from what they've done at the ports of Auckland around their rostering. If ship gets laid up, they can put those guys can change their roster and do things. So I think for me, next year in that early part, we'll be having that serious conversation with New Zealand Post. And likewise, I imagine there'll be other conversations with other employers as people's agreements expire. But for those of us with a crystal ball, and I've done a lot of agreements. I've sort of done a lot of 2 and 3 year agreements because in my mind I could see this coming, and I've tried to I guess negotiate my way through it so that we're kind of insulated to a point. There's always going to be still tough conversations with employers about what's going on, but we just deal with it as and when we need to. But the important thing is to have the conversation and not to try and do things that undermine the relationship. And I always say you get the relationship you deserve.
Yeah.
If you want to kind of do things to people, then you're gonna buy a reaction. I don't set out to wind people up. I don't have to.
Yeah. All right. Well, Joe, I think we've covered generally what we think is going to happen. I mean, as a union, ETU, you got a new leader. There's a lot of experience. You're the biggest private sector union. You see much sort of new officials coming in, philosophy in terms of a union. You don't see any change. You think ETU is going to be much the same as they have over the last 6 months to 12 months, or do you think there's going to be major difference in approach? I mean, what's your general sense? I mean,
No, I think it'll be steady as we go. I mean, we have seen quite an influx of what I call Generation X. So we've got some quite new young activists who are coming through, who are committed, pay equity, treaty, all of those things, they support and understand. So I think we'll just continue to focus on the areas that affect our members, continue to, drive the debates about pay equity and the like, and other issues, diversity and inclusion and all of those things. I think we'll just continue to focus on supporting our members as we navigate through this next period. I mean, this is not a new concept. The economies go up, economies come down, right? We're just in we're just in a kind of tough, essentially recessionary period. But if you want to be positive about it, that will turn around at some point, like it always does.
Then my last question to you really is, and that's what employers are always worried about when things are tough and they haven't got money, and then the union rattles a saber and comes in, we want this, we want that. If we don't get it, we're going to strike. I mean, do you see more industrial action in the year ahead or not? I mean, in the general sense, obviously we're not talking about the public sector, because with the nurses and the public service and all of that, it is what it is. But the private sector, I mean, ETU, I mean, my sense as a consultant, I know First Union used to be sort of basically flying the flag of, we are fairly hostile, and if we don't get what we want, we'll strike. ETU was a bit more measured, looked at facts and weighed things up and continued bargaining. Do you think there's going to be a change? I mean, I must admit, my personal sense is ETU has been more active and have actually gone on in strike various forms of industrial action, more so than probably 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, look, that's possibly fair. I think we've got a new generation of new generation coming through, and people have been feeling disaffected and left behind. Is it going to increase in the new year? I'm not sure. I think a lot of those agreements are going to see through, are going through next year. I don't think we'll see any major agreements up in the health sector. I think that's just going to bubble around. There are some agreements. I mean, we just take them as they come. I don't think we'll see any more or any less. It does concern me that we have a minister that just doesn't seem to really out to get us, but that's okay. I mean, one of the pleasing things in recent times has been there's generally widespread support across employers and unions and business around the Health and Safety Act, and that actually it's not broken, leave it alone. You're just going to make it, So that's a pleasing thing.
Yeah,
we'll just have to see what other, I guess, Christmas presents the Minister of Relations has got for us in the new year, and we'll just deal with them when we if we have to.
Yeah, well, I wonder what the next minimum wage forecast is going to be. That's probably going to.
Well, if I was going to put money on it, I would say if we get anything over 30 cents, we'll be doing well.
30 cents, you can't even buy wrapping paper for the present, eh?
No, you can't even get a potato fritter in it. But I suspect it will be in the vicinity. That's my sense. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2%. If we get more than that, well, you can ring me up and say you were wrong for once.
Yeah. But yeah, will do. I'll take you up on that.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. Thank you very much. Appreciate your wisdom as always, and we'll talk again.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.